Hi, my name is Jennifer Howard, and in today's session, we are going to discuss the differences between Enneagram Type 2 and Enneagram Type 9. I have gotten a whole lot of requests for this video, so we're going to go ahead and go straight to that. I am skipping over how to tell the difference between Enneagram Type 2 and Enneagram Type 8, simply because in my mind, that one should be a pretty obvious thing to pick apart. But if it's not for you, that's fine. It's okay. If you want me to go back and make that video, let me know and I will. I skipped over when I was doing my series on telling the difference between type 1 and the other types. I skipped over how to tell if you're type 1 or type 9. And then somebody came back to me and said, could you please make that video because I need help with that one. So I went back and made it. So if you need me to do Enneagram Type 2 versus Enneagram Type 8, let me know and I'll go back and make that video for you. Okay. Otherwise, we're going to kind of jump into Enneagram Type 2 and Enneagram Type 9. And as I do with any of my videos, when we're trying to tell two different types apart, the first question that I ask is, why do we get them confused in the first place? What is it about Enneagram Type 2 and Enneagram Type 9 that looks so very similar? And my answer to that question would be that they are both other-oriented in a sense. They're technically they're doing it a little differently, but if just to any person that's observing them on the outside, unless you're paying really, really close attention, they can both seem other-oriented. I think that when we're confusing type 2 and type 9, most of the time what's happening is I think we've got a lot of type 9s that are being confused for type 2. I don't think 2s are being confused for type 9, if that makes sense. So that's probably the primary reason that I think it's happening, is because they're both other-oriented. They can both appear on the outside as if they are choosing to do something for someone else so that someone else will be happy. And again, to an extent, that's true, but the motivations behind that behavior and the specificity with which that behavior is being acted out is very, very different between these two types, okay? So for starters, I want to talk about an internal difference. This is not a difference that you would observe in someone. So if you know somebody and you're trying to tell whether or not they're a 2 or a 9, this tip that I'm about to give you isn't going to help, because this is something that happens entirely on the inside. It's not something that you would see externally. However, if you are trying to decide if you are either an Enneagram Type 2 or an Enneagram Type 9, this tip is probably going to be really helpful for you, just with a little self-reflection, okay? I do want to say before I start off, I'm not going to, I'm borrowing this idea from a speaker that I heard one time. She talked about this, and she wasn't actually teaching about how to tell the difference between Enneagram Type 2 and Enneagram Type 9. She was talking about something altogether different, but I was listening to her tell this story, and I thought to myself, this would make a really great story to use as an example if somebody needed to know the difference between Enneagram Type 2 and Enneagram Type 9. So what she was talking about is how she's a 2 and her husband's a 9, and it's like if they're trying to decide where they're going to go out to eat for dinner. And, you know, if the whole family's in on it and everybody wants to go, I mean, I don't know, to like some kind of a burger joint to get cheeseburgers and fries or whatever else. But if she really wanted barbecue and her husband really wanted Italian food, for example, but the kids all wanted cheeseburgers, and they all decided to go get cheeseburgers because that's what the kids want. Her husband, who is a 9, would merge with that because he's a 9. So what that means is that he's talked himself into wanting cheeseburgers by the time he's gotten there. You know, in his mind, cheeseburgers really aren't so bad. He likes cheeseburgers. I'll eat those. That's fine. It's not a big deal. If that's what makes everybody happy and that's the easiest thing to do, then let's go. I'll eat a cheeseburger and I'll be super happy. She will go as well because she wants everyone else to be happy. But when she gets there and she's ready to sit down and eat her cheeseburger, she's happy that everyone else is happy. And on the outside, she's got this facade like it's not bothering her. But really, really deep on the inside, if she pays very close attention to herself, she still really wants barbecue. And she's kind of frustrated that she didn't get her barbecue. We got to go do what they wanted to do again, but we didn't get to go do what I wanted to do. So that's, excuse me. That's an internal mechanism that you could look for if you're trying to tell the difference between whether or not someone is a Type 2 or Type 9. That speaker that I was listening to, by the way, is a woman named Suzanne Stabile, which by now you may have heard of. She's recently co-authored a book called The Road Back to You with Ian something. I forget the guy's last name. Anyways, so I went and heard her speak in person once many years ago. It's probably been about 6 years ago now, and I don't know if she's still doing any of that or not, but that was a story that she was telling, and I remember hearing that, and I thought, one of these days, someone's going to ask me how to tell if I'm a 2 or a 9, and I'm going to use this story because it was perfect. So it was a really great example from her life that she shared that I thought would be applicable here. So anyways, there's a little bit of that. So that's one way that you can tell, just looking internally, again, if you're trying to decide for yourself whether or not you're a 2 or a 9. Because if you're a 9, you've merged. And merging and giving so that other people will be satisfied are two entirely different things. Do you see what I'm saying? 9s will forego what they want for the sake of keeping the peace, because the desire that they have, even under what they want to eat, for example, is to avoid conflict, to have that sense of just that undisturbed quiet inside of themselves. Does that make sense? And 2s, they want you to be happy because they want you to like them and they want you to love them. And so they tend to give in to things like that. But 2s, they're not merging. They're still holding on to what they want. 2s, what they're not telling you, and probably what they don't even really know themselves, is that as they're giving to you, they have this unconscious expectation that at some point you're going to give it back to them. Okay. And so over time, if you're a 2 and you're not getting back from others what you're giving to them, you kind of start to build up this frustration and this resentment, although it may not even necessarily represent itself that way at first. I think it's got to build up a little bit for you guys and kind of get to this boiling point before an alarm starts going off and you realize that you feel cheated, or you feel unloved, or whatever it is, that kind of a thing, right? Because I think in the mind of a 2, if in the mind of a 2, it's kind of like, I love you, and because I love you, I'm going to do all of these things for you, and I'm going to sacrifice for you, and I'm going to give of myself for you. Therefore, if you loved me, you would do the same thing back, right? I think that's kind of how to see it. And again, I don't think they even realize that they're seeing the world that way. I think that it's an extremely unconscious thing for them. And so one of the biggest differences that I'm trying to say between 2 and 9 is 9s merge because their desire underneath even what they want, the pleasure that they're seeking, is just to have that inner peace, not to be bothered, to maintain this emotional equilibrium, if you will. And 2s want to feel loved and they want to get back what they're giving. Okay, so it's not just about you being happy. Don't think that 2s are giving, 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 and then they go to bed and they're like, oh, I gave so much today, I can die happy now. Because there's more to it than that, because they're still waiting on part 2, right? They're still waiting on the return on their investment. 9s get the return on their investment in the moment. They get it immediately, because really what they're hoping to get by giving into what you want is for you to just leave them alone and let them be at peace and do their own thing, so that they can maintain that internal peace, that wall that separates them from conflict and from things that make them very uncomfortable. And so merging is one of the ways that they do that. So when they merge and they give you what you want, then immediately in the moment, you're happy. That means you're not going to bother them. Great. They just got what they wanted. They can be left alone and just not be bothered, right? But 2s are still waiting on the return from their investment. So they can have some of that. Again, there's a lot of anger there, I think, but I don't think that if you're a 2, you're going to realize that you're feeling angry. And I don't think that you're going to realize even that you're feeling taken advantage of right away. I think initially what will happen for you as a 2 is you're going to start to have some more superficial emotions bubble up first, and those will be an indicator that there's something deeper that needs to be dealt with. When I say superficial emotions, I don't mean like, I don't know, frivolous emotions. They're very practical, but what I'm saying is they're secondary emotions. That's perhaps a better way to say it. They're not really the issue. So I think if you're a 2 and you kind of start to notice that you're feeling a little agitated or you're irritated, or even I would say especially if you're a 2 and you're feeling like you need to withdraw, or you're feeling like you hate people and you don't want anything to do with people, if you start having any thoughts at all like that, like I just need to get away from you, I'm sick of being around you, that is a massive red flag that you have got some kind of internal expectation that wasn't met, that you thought was going to be met. And if I were you, if you start having feelings like that or thoughts like that, go ahead and allow yourself to withdraw. I would advise you to get some quiet time, and I would advise you to ask God to seek to help you kind of search that out through yourself, because he knows you better than you know yourself. And just take that feedback and kind of lean on him and let him walk you through that and bring any expectations to your mind that you need. If you have any other things, like any other tools that you use that you want to integrate into that, then fine, do what you need to do. But what I'm saying is that would be my suggestion, and those are some things to look for, just some cues if you're a 2, that would indicate to you that you have got a deeper issue underneath that's not being dealt with. So this brings me to point number 2. How can Enneagram Type 2 and Enneagram Type 9 look so much alike? Well, the reason is that they're both pretty self-unaware, okay? They spend so much time. Well, I take that back. I'm going to phrase this very carefully, because there is a nuanced difference here between 2 and 9, but it's a very important difference, okay? The bottom line is that Enneagram Type 2 and Enneagram Type 9, they are very self-unaware, okay? By the way, Enneagram Type 7 is also very self-unaware. Out of all of the Enneagram types, the groups that are I call it the optimistic triad. I think it's called the positive outlook triad, depending on what book you read. You've got the competent triad, the reactive triad, and the positive outlook triad. The positive outlook triad is composed of Type 2, Type 7, and Type 9, okay? And I would say that out of all the types on the Enneagram, they're the ones that are the most out of touch with themselves, and here's why. In a nutshell, to be a 2, a 7, or a 9, and to be in the positive outlook triad just simply means that you cope with the world by, I want to be really careful with how I say this. I don't necessarily know if I like the word denial, even though it is a form of denial. It is a form of denial. It's kind of this mix of denial and distraction. It's and making things better than they actually are. Okay, so 2s and 9s are doing this. 7s are doing it too, but this isn't a video about 7. Okay, so what that means is that when something happens and you don't have any control over it, and you don't like it, you can't change it, and it really hurts, and it's kind of messing with you internally. If you're a 2 or a 9, you are trying to alter, not necessarily reality. You're not trying to alter what's happened. What you're doing is you're trying to adjust your perspective and your stance on that so that it's not a big deal anymore. Because if it's not a big deal, it can't upset you anymore, right? So I know I can't change these circumstances right here, but I can change how I think about the circumstances. And if I just blow it off and make it not a big deal, then I'm fine. The problem with that is that it's not true, and it's lying to yourself. There is a way to approach situations in life and to say, I have no control over this, I can't change it. But in the process of that, you also have to acknowledge what your inability to control it is doing to you, because you have to process through that. You don't get to just brush things under the rug and pretend like they don't exist. I feel like for Enneagram Type 2 and Enneagram Type 9, as well as Enneagram Type 7, a large part of their psychology is very much about, I have this phrase that I use a lot. We've all heard the whole, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I add on to it. I like to say, if I see no evil and I hear no evil and I speak no evil, then there must not be any evil. Well, the problem with that is that it's just not true. But I feel like that's a mentality that Enneagram Type 2, Type 7, and Type 9 are largely adhering to, and very much on an unconscious level. So again, I mentioned in my video yesterday, what's the difference between Type 2 and Type 7, how they're so self-unaware. And I was talking about in that video, you cannot know half of yourself. You don't get to go on this journey to look inward, to discover yourself and, play around in all of the pretty parts of yourself that you like, and just completely ignore the parts of yourself that you don't like. Okay, you don't get to do that. You either don't know yourself, or you're going to take that journey and you're going to take it all the way. Even if you managed to skirt around the parts of yourself that you didn't want to deal with, the reality is that once you've started that journey, it will force you into that darkness at some place or another, or you're going to have to hop off the road entirely. You just don't get to have the luxury of becoming self-aware, but being selective about it. It's not how it works. Okay, that's true for Enneagram Type 2 and Enneagram Type 9. So Enneagram Type 2 and Enneagram Type 9 are both very self-unaware. So here's why. These are my observations. I would appreciate if you guys had any input on this, or if you think that it's something different. let me know. But here's why I think that that's happening, and here's how I see it display itself a little differently in both types, okay? So they're similar because they're both very self-unaware. And the reason they're both very self-unaware is because they're both denying the reality. I don't think they're denying the reality of problems. I think that 2s and 9s and even 7s, I think they're denying how those problems are affecting them, okay? So 2s are doing it this way. 2s, I think, this is again just my perspective, are so relationally focused that I think something goes wrong. And for 2s, by the way, I will say the type of reality that tends to upset them the most are when there are relational upsets. And I'm not saying that other things don't upset them. You know, if you're a 2 and you have a problem with time management and you're trying really hard, but you just can't get it under your feet. And then finally you come into work one day and they fire you because you were late again, you know, and you know that you were trying really hard, but you just can't figure out how to manage your schedule and do all of this stuff. I'm not saying that something like that wouldn't upset you, but I think that when you're a 2, a major life stressor for you, probably the thing that you fear the most and have the hardest time dealing with, and probably the thing that you're trying to deny the most, is when you have a relational problem or when you have to admit that you don't have the standing or the reputation with someone that you really had hoped that you had. Because again, you're very relational. If you're a type 2, everything in life for you is seen through the lens of emotional connection and relationship. Okay, right? Because that's where you get your identity from. Not a good thing, but that's what's happening. Okay, so I think that if you're 2 and you're having relational problems, especially, I think the tendency is to say, let me come up with an example. The tendency may be to say, okay, so I don't know. I'm a 2 and my girlfriend said that I said something that really hurt her feelings, and she doesn't feel like she's ever going to share that part of herself with me again because she did, and I said something that just completely made her feel like it was invalidated, and so now I've kind of lost a part of that connection that we can have. I just kind of destroyed intimacy with this person, which is what I really wanted in the first place. But I know today everything seems like it's really cool, and tomorrow I'll take her out and I'll take her shopping and I'll buy her whatever she likes and we can go and do whatever it is that she wants to do. And then all of that happens, and at the end of the day she's in a really good mood and you guys are snuggling on the couch again, and she's not even brought up the issue that she had yesterday. And so in your mind you've just decided everything's cool because we're really tight again and everyone's happy and we're laughing and we're smiling and it's one big happy family kind of a thing. So therefore, we must not have any relational problems. Everything's okay because everyone seems happy right now and I've given everyone what they want. So it's all good, right? And the answer to that question is no, it's probably not all good. First of all, if you're a 2, it's not good in you because you haven't even begun to deal with the anxiety that you had when you thought that you had lost or compromised a relational connection. That is an anxiety that you must go back to, process, and walk through. I don't care how scary it is. I don't care how comfortable it is. You need to do it, if for no other reason, just so that you can learn that you can go back and address those anxieties and come out on the other side of that process and be completely fine, because you can. But if you've never done it before, then you don't know that's possible. That's a counterintuitive statement to you if you're a 2, okay? If you're a type 9, 9s are always a bit harder to describe because, again, I mentioned in my video that I made yesterday how to tell, maybe a couple days ago, if I'm a 1 or a 9. One of the ways that I almost know someone's a 9 is the fact that they're so nondescript. If there's just nothing distinct about you that sticks out to me, that's kind of like the flag that's going off in my head that says, oh, this person might be a 9, because they don't really have any opinions on anything. Emotionally, they're pretty flat, you know. They kind of they're not really the extroverted person in the room that's getting all the attention, but they're not necessarily the wallflower either. They're just kind of there, you know. That's my sign that someone's a type 9. Do you see what I'm saying? So because they're so nondescript, I think it's harder to put Enneagram type 9 into words. So I want to be careful with how I describe their inability to be their inability to be aware, self-aware, because they're not self-aware. Oh my goodness. Oh, I have some funny examples. To be self-unaware as a 9 is a defense mechanism for you, and you choose it. I don't necessarily want to say that you're consciously choosing it, because you're not, but you are unconsciously choosing it, okay? This is a pretty active force within type 9, okay? Type 9s, I have found, are sometimes the hardest to teach about the Enneagram because, first of all, you don't know yourself well enough in most cases to know that you're a 9. Most of the time when I teach 9s the Enneagram, they will come away thinking that they are either any other number but type 9, or they'll think that they are a bunch of numbers. You know, I've had 9s say to me, well, I feel like I'm a 1 and a 3. I'm like a combination of those two. And I'll say, okay, you're not, but and there are reasons for that. But sometimes I've never had a 9 tell me that they don't think that any of the numbers sound like them. In almost all cases, what happens when I teach Enneagram to type 9 is they will say to me, I can see a little bit of myself in all of these. I guess I'm all of them. I don't know how to tell which one I am, okay? And this is coming from the fact that your unconscious defense mechanism, or one of them, has been to just ignore the self. And here's why. When you're a 9 and your fear is conflict, and I would say, again, this is my perspective, that if you're a 9, I don't think the fear is simply that there's going to be conflict. I think the fear is that the conflict is going to create uncomfortable emotions inside of yourself that you just don't want to deal with. You don't like it. It's uncomfortable. I don't want to deal with that. So if I avoid confrontational situations, or situations where things may get heated, situations where pressure may be put on me to do something that I don't want to do, if I can avoid all of those situations, if I can avoid saying something that upsets somebody or that may make them, I don't know, that may put me on the radar, so to speak, I think when you're a 9, if that's what you're fearing, it's going to be natural for you to avoid conflict. So what 9s have done in order to protect themselves from all of those uncomfortable emotions that kind of get stirred up within themselves is they have learned to just ignore it. It's kind of like I told you earlier, my phrase, if I see no evil and I hear no evil and I speak no evil, there must not be any evil. So for a 9, for example, I'll use anger, okay? Anger is a big deal for 9s. They have anger management problems. Most of them do. And an anger management problem, by the way, is not an inability to control your anger. An anger management problem could be controlling it too much, okay? An anger management problem could be denying the fact that you have any anger, period, which is what 9s do, okay? 8, 9, and 1 have anger management problems. 2, 3, and 4 have shame management problems. They have identity problems, okay? 5, 6, and 7 have anxiety and fear management problems, okay? So when you're 9, and actually while I'm here, I do want to make a distinction between Enneagram Type 9 and Enneagram Type 7, because I've gotten the question a lot of times, what's the difference between Type 9 and Type 7? Because they both tend to avoid the uncomfortable things inside, right? But they're doing it very differently. And here's the difference. Enneagram Type 9 is trying to avoid their own uncomfortable emotions primarily. They're okay dealing with what's wrong with them. I can talk to a 9 all day long, and 9s will, and I can say, well, you know, you have a problem with this. And if they're self-aware enough to know that they have the problem, then they'll admit it. 9s aren't denying that they have problems because they're ashamed to admit it and because they can't look at that dark side of themselves. 9s are denying it because they just haven't seen it yet. Does that make sense? But once they've seen it, they're like, yeah, you're right. I have anger management problems. Okay, 7s are running away from their own darkness, their emptiness. Emptiness is a form of darkness. Do you understand that? It's not necessarily an uncomfortable emotion, although uncomfortable emotions are a part of it for 7, okay? They're you'll never meet a 7, I think, that denies having that problem with dealing uncomfortable emotions, but the primary thing that 7s are avoiding is their own darkness, their own emptiness. 7s can't look at themselves and say, this is what's wrong with me, this is how I'm inadequate, this is how I'm empty, this is how I'm lacking what I need to be a whole and healthy person. 7s have a hard time doing that, okay? I think they see it, but they have a really hard time allowing that to be a conscious thing that they contemplatively ponder. Okay, that's the difference between 7 and 9. So nines are trying to avoid that those uncomfortable emotions. And so when you're a 9, the mechanism that you've developed to do that is just to simply tell yourself that you're not feeling them. You just kind of, it's almost like picture a rug and they just pick the rug up and they're just sweeping it under the rug and they put the rug back down, gone. I no longer have any negative emotions because I can't see them anymore. Right? And so if that's what you're going to do to help yourself avoid the things that you're feeling inside that you really don't want to deal with, you're going to start merging. This is where merging comes in, because again, the self is a whole being. You don't get to just selectively know yourself, and you don't get to selectively toy with yourself. You don't get to manipulate a part of yourself and have that not affect the rest of your psychology. So when we start sweeping away these emotions and these desires that we had that weren't ever fulfilled, these opinions that we had that no one ever listened to, the feelings that we had that were disregarded, that made us feel like our opinion and our place here in this situation didn't matter. When we get to start sweeping that under the rug and ignoring it, and you know, it's not a big deal, we start minimizing it so that we don't have to feel it. We're doing that with what we want as well. We're doing that with what I don't necessarily think it's what we think. I think it's, I think it occurs a lot with 9s with desires, especially the things that they want. All of a sudden, the things that they want just aren't a big deal anymore. It's really not a big deal. Yeah, I can do this and I would be just as happy. And so you learn to be happy in the situations that you're in. You learn to adapt. You learned how to take the things that meant the most to you and sweep them underneath of the rug as if they didn't exist. Although very, very deep inside of yourself, you very much know that they still do. Okay? But when you've done this for years and 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 years, and this is all that you've known, and you're a 9, what you come to find out as you begin to do an inward freedom journey is that you discover that you have absolutely no idea how to know yourself. You may find that you have absolutely no idea what you like anymore. Again, I haven't seen this as the case like with opinions. All the 9s that I know, even the ones that are just really hardcore stuck in their number, they're very, very opinionated. They know exactly what they think and what they don't think and what they would prefer and what they wouldn't prefer. But it's just like they've decided that it just doesn't matter anymore. So they've let it go. They've just kind of got this emotional detachment from their desires now. They know what they are, but it's like they don't matter. So why get attached to that? Just sweep that under the rug and just go on and take what life gives me and learn to be happy with that. And they have. They've taught themselves how to do that. So for this reason, Enneagram Type 9 and Enneagram Type 2 can look a lot alike. And there's that, again, self-unawareness that's there. 2s have spent so much time serving the needs of other people that they're not really sure quite what they need anymore. I cannot even tell you how many 2s that I have known. And I have said to them, you know, they'll come to me and we'll do like consultation sessions and things, and they'll go through all of this thing in life and they'll talk about, well, this is how much I've given to all these other people. And you know, and I feel so empty inside and I don't know what's wrong with me and I haven't been very happy lately and I haven't had any energy and I just want to be alone all the time and that's not like me. And so that's the flag that I was telling you about. You know, they'll recognize that and they'll come to me and they'll say, I don't know what's wrong. And I'll say, okay, well, what do you want right now? What would make you feel better right now? And they have no clue what to tell me. They can't articulate it. They will literally sit there and it's like this look is on their face, like they're really thinking about it. And they'll give up and they'll say, I don't know. I don't really know what I need or what I want. It's as if they've never thought about it before. Not truly, okay? And I'm not talking about superficial needs or wants. I mean, a 2 can wake up in the morning and say, man, you know, I think I'd like to go to Starbucks and get a cup of coffee on the way to work today. And they go to Starbucks and they'll get a cup of coffee on the way to work. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about their deepest needs, their deepest desires. 2s often, unless they've got someone to help walk them through that, and unless, especially the Enneagram is fantastic for them because it helps give them language for this. But if a 2 hasn't found the Enneagram, and if they haven't had somebody who's really attuned into that, help walk them through that, 2s don't understand that they want to be wanted, that they need to be needed. If you asked a 2 to verbalize that, they wouldn't come up with that language. You've got to give it to them. And then they'll say, yes, that's it. That's what I was trying to say. You see what I'm saying? Nines have to be told sometimes too, I think, what they're feeling. My husband is like this, and it drives me bananas. He's a 9 on the Enneagram, which I know I've told you guys a ton of times, and I know that I've already mentioned in this video that they have anger management problems. Specifically for 9, the anger management issue is the denial of anger altogether. Sweep it under the rug, therefore, just doesn't exist. I'm not angry. My husband is the person that can look me in the face. His face is red. He's screaming at the top of his lungs, throwing things, slamming doors. And I'll say to him, "What's wrong? Why are you so angry?" And he will look at me, screaming still, and say, "I'm not angry. Why do you keep asking me why I'm angry?" And it's kind of like, I'll look at him, and in my mind, I'm like, how do you look at you right now? You're throwing things. How do you not know that you're not angry? He's also the person that will get really anxious, okay? He'll go into his 6 mode when he's feeling really stressed out, and especially if he's had like a couple of months at work that have been really, really hard, and he'll come home and he's worried about money and worried about my job and what am I going to do if this happens and what am I going to do if this happens, and he'll start coming up with all this crazy worst case scenario stuff, and he'll come up with like these crazy like tinfoil hat on our head ideas about things that we need to do to prepare for these crazy ideas that he's come up with. And I'll say to him, I'll say, why are you so anxious right now? And he'll say, "Jenny, I'm not anxious. I'm just trying to, you know, make sure that we're prepared for things that could happen in the future." And I'll say, "Yeah, that's a form of anxious. You're worrying right now." "Jenny, I'm not worrying. I'm just, trying to be prepared and I'm trying to plan, but I'm not worried." Worried is when you are worried about stuff and you can't stop thinking about it. And then I'll be like, "Yeah, like you have been every single day that you've come home from work for the last 2 months." And he will deny being anxious and angry. He'll deny being hurt if someone hurts his feelings. I can tell sometimes that I'll say things that hurt his feelings, and he'll deny being hurt. He doesn't even understand that I just hurt his feelings, right? Because it happens, and he's like, and it's a negative emotion, and it's coming in, and he's like, "Oh, no, 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 I don't want to deal with this. I can't deal with this. Can't handle it. Here's the rug. Sweet, covered up. Done." Whew, that was close. I almost had a negative emotion. Seriously, I'm not making fun of him. I'm telling you that this is the unconscious psychology that's occurring in him because he's a 9. And if you're a 9, this is the unconscious psychology that's occurring in you as well. Not the unconscious psychology that's occurring in 2. That's different, as I've already explained. Anyways, I'm way over. Those are my examples. I'll make it quick. If you need me to clarify something, comments, I will try to restate it in a different way that's easier for you to understand. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will be back to start on my series on telling the difference between Enneagram Type 3 and the other Enneagram Type numbers whenever it is that I get the chance.